right, we got another three-way here. This one's retro Roadster Gaiternationals, because this is the first shootout we've ever had where all three bikes have fork gaiters.
Rubber ones.
Rubber ones. We like all the kinds of latest technology, electronic suspension, traction control, 1,000 horsepower. But sometimes it's great to get on bikes like this that you don't need all that. You cruise around town. We stayed out of the canyons for the most part, cruised around town, Long Beach, figured it all out here in town. And these bikes were all great to hammer around on because, well, Evans, you were saying about the Triumph. You had it for a few weeks and you love just roaming around town on it, right?
So yeah, I've had the Triumph for about 3 weeks now, and anytime I had to go run an errand that didn't involve carrying something, I'd jump on the Triumph because it's light, it's agile, it's got a great upright riding position, and you know, the power delivery is just really fun. But I think any one of these bikes here would fit the bill. It's just I happen to have the Triumph parked at my house.
Yeah, they're all cool bikes in their own way, right? Character, a little bit of soul. We've got Italy here, the V7 2 is a refinement of the V7, which is Moto Guzzi's best-selling model. The new Triumph Street Twin, of course, and one of John's favorite bikes, and upgraded this year with a much better front brake, the Street 750 Harley.
Just like Evans had that in his garage for a while, I had a Street 750 at my house for a long time last summer. And I had a Super Duke R there too, and a couple other bikes. And if I was going somewhere not too far, I'd always jump on the little Harley. I really like it. It's actually one of my favorite Harley-Davidsons, if not my favorite Harley-Davidson. The little motor revs to 8,000 or 8,500, and actually makes just as much horsepower as that thing. Last time we put them both on the dyno, even though the Triumph's 900 cc's. This has to work a little harder. It doesn't quite have the torque off the bottom. But it feels really small and compact. If you're as big as Evans, you might not like it. It fits me really good. It feels small and compact. I dig hopping on it and going.
Well, when I was riding the Street 750, yeah, my legs are too long for it, but I didn't feel overly cramped on it like I have on some other smaller cruisers. It was compact, but I wasn't uncomfortable.
Yeah, and those two are both what you'd call standard ergonomics. This one leans a little more toward cruiser, just because the foot pegs are a little more forward, but still more of a standard, kind of halfway between standard and cruiser. There's a little more weight on your rear end, but this might have the best seat, don't you think? The seat's real nice and cush.
Yeah, and I missed the shootouts with that the last couple times we had that in a shootout, and so this is my first time to really ride it around, and I really enjoyed it. It feels zippy, and the front brake, I'm glad they did that change because I have no complaints with the front brake. It almost feels as good as the Guzzi's Brembo.
A couple of the wires we complained about were kind of sloppy, have been tucked away more neatly on the new bike, and those kind of things are
And the horn that stuck out is now tucked away nicely.
So a few of those tiny things, if they'd been right last year, this bike probably would have gotten much better reviews, I bet.
Well, I want to add at the top of my list for what they should fix for next year is the ground clearance on the right side. But at the same time, the ground clearance on the left is okay, but on the right, you don't get the warning of the peg. You get the clamp for the exhaust pipe.
That's one of those little details though. It's like a hose clamp, and they have it so that the bolt is right where it'll drag. If they'd rotated it so the bolt's right there, you might not drag anything much.
Yeah, more ground clearance would be nice, because these two have pretty good ground clearance, nearly equal, I'd say. And yeah, they're a little more fun to go around corners because you can get more lean angle before you start revving.
That's true, but in the few corners that we did go around up in Palo Verde repeatedly, this thing wasn't far behind.
All right, let's talk about a few of the differences and the similarities. We've got two 750s here, right? The Guzzi 744, that's 753, I think. Close on that, but the Guzzi is the only air-cooled engine here. These two are water-cooled. Triumph brings a little more cubic inches to the party, and it feels gruntier, right? Right off the bottom, it's got the most power, definitely.
Makes a bunch of torque down low.
Yep.
And I got a comment on the exhaust note of the Triumph. We had to crawl around under it to make sure we didn't have a stage 1 pipe on it because it is so throaty. And I think they get away with it because the engine itself is so quiet. When I was riding it, I went from having being on the throttle and rolling off so it was all the way closed, coming up to a stop. On more than one occasion, I was on the throttle and hearing this wonderful exhaust, and I rolled off to come to a stop, and I had to look down to make sure it hadn't stalled because it's so quiet at an idle.
And yet when you get on the throttle, right? This morning we're at the coffee shop and I go, hey, this thing sounds pretty good. Weir, weir, we set off a car alarm right out of the car next to us, which is, you know, for an EPA legal exhaust, that's pretty cool. That's the 270-degree crank. It's an inline twin, a parallel twin, but with the 270-degree crank, it sounds like a cool V-twin, and I don't think there's anything to complain about as far as the way this thing sounds. It's beautiful.
They got the 900 engine set up really nicely. The EFI is spot on. It's a little abrupt at the higher RPMs, but where you're doing it around town, it's silky smooth. The transmission shifts really nicely. I think the gears are well spaced. I can't think of a single complaint about the engine.
I can only complain that it's all over for the engine at 7,000 RPM, because that's the price that we paid for that down low grunt. The old Bonneville revved on to like 8,000, I think. So this one you give up a little top end, but it's so torquey down low you don't really miss it most of the time at all. The Guzzi looks like a retro bike, but the Guzzi feels like a retro bike, and the Triumph feels like a modern motorcycle. The brakes are just like the ones, the sliding piston, 2-piston deal, but they're just like the cheap brakes on the other two bikes. But on the Triumph, they work fantastic.
My favorite,
it feels like,
for sure.
It feels like there's dual discs up there.
John, you complimented the Harley about a few things that you really like about it. The Guzzi, we're talking a lot about the Triumph. This is the newest bike here of the group. But this V7 that's cool in its own special way, right? It does feel kind of older. Its handling is more deliberate, right? Kind of like how Italian bikes used to be. It feels like a long wheelbase. It's the only bike with shaft drive here. Triumph has a chain and the Harley has a belt. So we got 3 different kind of drive systems here. But the Guzzi feels authentic somehow. And that's a cliche word, but it does feel like it comes from that heritage of Guzzi. Interesting about this bike is this is all built in Italy. The Harley-Davidson, some parts are manufactured in India, they're assembled in America. The Triumph, manufactured primarily in Thailand, so they're saving some costs there. So the Guzzi is the most expensive bike here, just about $9,000. The Triumph's $8,700, which $300 less than that, and some of the componentry looks really nice. It kind of looks and feels like a more premium motorcycle than the rest of them, I'd say.
We could go back and forth on this for a long time, but to me, I really like the looks of the Harley. I especially like the blue. I don't like the tank seam on that. The tank seam looks cheap to me.
Harley's the only one without a tank seam?
There's no tank seam under here, and I love that. I just love the way the tank fits over the engine and the polished cooling fins, and the stance of the thing, kind of an aggressive, and the fact that it's low.
And it does wheelies.
It'll wheelie if you want a wheelie.
I seem to remember seeing the Guzzi wheelie this morning.
That one wheelies too. It's got a single plate dry clutch though, so its clutch tires out after a few attempts.
But I think we should talk about how nice the transmission is with the update.
It did get better, new 6-speed transmission.
It definitely feels slicker, nicer, more put together, not notchy.
It's brand new, but it's not as nice as the one in the Triumph. And they're both better than the one in the Harley, but I don't care because I like this one. Although for me, it'd be between the Triumph and the Harley. I haven't really made up my mind yet. But this is the least expensive, about $7,500, even though there's no ABS. Yeah, I think that for around town and stuff, they're all equally good for around town. If you want to ride sporty and go through the curves, you want the Triumph. Maybe for cross country, you might want the Guzzi because it's kind of long-legged and nice.
The Guzzi can lean over really well. It's just, as you said before, the handling is very deliberate. You can't snap it into a corner. You have to tell it what to do.
Yeah. After I jumped off the Guzzi onto the Triumph in those curves, I was like, oh yeah, this is much easier to ride. Everything's smoother and quicker and more precise. You know, it might be if you're just not going to ride curves a lot. If you just want for around town, it might come down to the looks. Huh? Which one do you like the looks of best? They kind of look vintage, but they got modern technology going in, especially the Triumph and the engine of the Street 750. Yeah, it's a good little bike for $7,500.
All right, as per usual, we got to go out, fill out the scorecards, but we have some personal favorites, and probably of all the ways you can score a bike, The Triumph might end up winning this one, but you'll have to read the whole story on Motorcycle.com. Go to Motorcycle.com right now.